Commander Vex Thane of the Galactic Defense Coalition had witnessed countless species attempt to prove their worth in combat trials. But watching the human delegation prepare for their marksmanship evaluation, well, that was entertainment of the highest caliber. "Look at them!" Vex Thane chittered to his aide, Captain Zern Delta, his four eyes tracking the peculiar bipedal creatures as they fiddled with primitive projectile weapons. "They bring metal tubes that fire tiny pellets. How quaint." The human delegation consisted of 3 representatives: Captain Marcus Vale, a grizzled veteran with scars mapping his weathered face like battle trophies; Lieutenant Samara Knox, whose steady gaze could probably cut through reinforced hull plating; and Sergeant Jake Morrison, who looked like he could bench press a hover tank without breaking a sweat. "Sir," Zern Delta's tentacles twitched with barely contained amusement. Their weapons appeared to be single-shot devices. No plasma charges, no quantum accelerators, no molecular disruptors. Just bang, and a small piece of metal flies out. Vex Thane's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. The Krillian delegation nearby erupted in their own version of mirth, their crystalline bodies chiming like broken wind chimes. The Vorthak representatives, massive reptilian beings with enough firepower strapped to their bodies to level a small moon, simply shook their heads in disgust. "Perhaps," announced Admiral Keth Prime, the imposing Zentorian overseeing the trials, "we should explain the evaluation parameters to our human friends." The way he pronounced human made it sound like a particularly unpleasant digestive condition. Captain Vale stepped forward, his boots clicking against the metallic floor of the massive testing chamber. The space could easily accommodate a small starship, with target ranges extending for kilometers in multiple directions. Holographic projections of various combat scenarios flickered to life around them. "We understand the parameters, Admiral," Vale replied, his voice carrying the kind of calm confidence that suggested he'd had this conversation before. Multiple moving targets, varying distances, environmental hazards, and time constraints. Standard marksmanship evaluation. The Krillian delegate, Shard Singer Nexus, produced a sound like glass breaking in reverse. "Forgive my amusement, human, but your equipment seems inadequate. We utilize photon burst rifles capable of 17,000 rounds per minute. The Vorthak employ plasma cannons that can melt through battleship armor. And you bring what appears to be museum pieces." Lieutenant Knox smiled, and something about that expression made several aliens unconsciously step backward. "Sometimes, Shard Singer, the old ways work best." "Old ways?" Vex Thane's voice cracked with disbelief. "Your weapons require manual loading of individual projectiles. Our scouts report that human soldiers often carry only 30 to 60 shots total into combat. How do you expect to survive prolonged engagement with such limitations?" Sergeant Morrison chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the chamber's reinforced walls. "Well, Commander, that's assuming we need more than 1 shot per target." The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the soft hum of the chamber's atmospheric processors. Then, like a dam bursting, the alien delegates erupted in laughter, chittering, chiming, and roaring their amusement. Admiral Keth Prime's 6 arms gestured dismissively. "Amusing bravado, humans. But this evaluation measures practical combat effectiveness. Your species wishes to join the Galactic Defense Coalition, yet you arm yourselves with primitive kinetic weapons and make impossible claims about accuracy." "Impossible?" Captain Vale's eyebrow arched with practiced skepticism. "Admiral, with respect, your definition of impossible might need some adjustment. the testing chamber's main display activated, showing a complex three-dimensional battlefield scenario. Enemy fighters darted between asteroid fields, while capital ships maneuvered in the background. The simulation parameters scrolled past: 250 targets, maximum engagement range of 8 kilometers, mission time limit of 15 minutes, minimum accuracy requirement of 75% for advancement to Phase 2 trials. Standard Evaluation Protocol announced the chamber's AI system in a voice smoother than liquid helium. Participants may use any weapons and equipment brought for testing. Evaluation begins in 60 seconds. The Krillian delegation had already assembled their photon burst arrays, weapons that looked like someone had crossed a telescope with a particularly angry lightning storm. The Vorthak representatives locked their plasma cannons into firing positions, the weapons humming with enough contained energy to power a small city. Even the smaller delegations sported impressive arsenals: particle beam rifles, quantum disruptor arrays, molecular dissolution projectors. And there stood the three humans, each holding a single rifle. "This is painful to watch," Zern Delta whispered to his commander. "Perhaps we should suggest they withdraw before the embarrassment becomes too severe." Vex Thane's eyes tracked the humans as they took their positions. Something about their movement patterns suggested more competence than their primitive weapons would indicate. They spread out with practiced efficiency, each taking a different section of the combat zone. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no apparent concern about the impossible odds they faced. 30 seconds to evaluation start, the AI announced. Captain Vale's voice carried clearly across the chamber as he spoke to his companions. "Knox, you take the fast movers. Morrison, handle the heavy armor. I'll clean up whatever's left." "Copy that, Captain," Knox replied, settling into a shooting position that somehow made her look like she was carved from stone. "Just try to leave something for us to shoot at." The other alien delegates had noticed the humans' casual conversation and found it even more amusing than their primitive weapons. The Vorthak commander, General Thorn Skull, actually bellowed with laughter. "They speak as if they've already won," he roared. "With 3 single-shot rifles against 250 targets. The humans are either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." Morrison grinned, adjusting his rifle's scope with movements so precise they looked mechanical. "General, in my experience, there's often not much difference between the two." 10 seconds to evaluation start. All participants, assume ready positions. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft whir of alien weapons powering up to full charge. Energy readings spiked across the monitoring systems as the various delegations prepared to unleash overwhelming firepower upon the simulation targets. The three humans simply stood there, rifles held casually, looking for all the world like they were waiting for a bus, rather than participating in a combat evaluation that would determine their species' military credibility. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Evaluation begins now. The chamber exploded into chaos. Photon bursts screamed through the air like angry comets. Plasma bolts turned sections of the simulation space into miniature suns. Particle beams carved geometric patterns through the holographic battlefield as the alien delegates opened fire with the enthusiasm of children who just discovered fireworks. And in the middle of this spectacular light show, 3 soft cracks echoed through the chamber. Bang, bang, bang. That was it. 3 shots. The humans lowered their weapons and stepped back from their firing positions while the alien delegates continued their impressive but increasingly desperate barrage of firepower. Vex Thane blinked all 4 eyes in rapid succession. Did they just stop shooting? The display screens showed the battle continuing to rage. Enemy fighters wove between exploding asteroids, while the alien delegates poured enough firepower into the simulation to sterilize a small planet. Energy readings peaked and redlined as weapons systems strained to track and eliminate the numerous targets. But something was wrong with the target count. "Current targets remaining," the AI announced with its characteristic calm. 247. Zern Delta's tentacles writhed in confusion. Only 3 targets eliminated? The humans fired 3 shots and hit 3 targets? That's actually not terrible, considering their primitive weapons. Admiral Keth Prime's expression suggested he'd swallowed something unpleasant. 3 hits from 3 shots is respectable accuracy, but hardly sufficient for Phase 2 advancement. They would need to eliminate at least 188 targets to meet minimum requirements. The battle simulation continued. Alien delegates burned through ammunition at prodigious rates, their sophisticated weapons tracking and engaging multiple targets simultaneously. The Kryllian photon burst arrays alone were firing thousands of rounds per minute. The chamber's air recycling systems worked overtime to clear the residual energy discharge. Captain Vale watched the proceedings with the detached interest of someone observing a particularly elaborate theatrical performance. "Impressive light show," he commented to Knox. "Very colorful." "Bit excessive, though," she replied, critically examining a Vorthak plasma cannon that was literally glowing cherry red from sustained firing. All that energy expenditure for relatively few target eliminations. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Poor resource management. In a real combat situation, they'd be out of ammunition and defenseless within minutes. The alien delegates were too focused on their firing solutions to pay attention to human commentary, but the observation staff couldn't help but notice the casual nature of the humans' conversation. They stood there like spectators at a sporting event, occasionally pointing out particularly impressive explosions or commenting on weapon effectiveness. "Current targets remaining," the AI updated, 193. Admiral Keth Prime's calculation centers worked furiously. The alien delegates had eliminated 57 targets in approximately 8 minutes of sustained fire. At this rate, they might barely achieve the minimum accuracy requirement, assuming their weapons didn't overheat or run out of ammunition. But the humans had stopped shooting after 3 shots and 3 hits. Even with perfect accuracy, they couldn't possibly eliminate enough targets to advance. Time remaining: 4 minutes, 30 seconds. The firing intensified as alien delegates realized they were running short on time. Weapons that were already pushed to their limits began to redline completely. Several Kryllian arrays shut down automatically to prevent catastrophic overload. A Vorthak plasma cannon actually caught fire, forcing its operator to abandon the weapon and switch to a backup system. Through it all, the 3 humans stood calmly in their positions, weapons powered down, apparently unconcerned by their impending failure. Time remaining: 1 minute. Desperation crept into the alien delegates' firing patterns. Accuracy suffered as they prioritized rate of fire over precision. The chamber filled with so much residual energy that the environmental systems began issuing warnings about atmospheric ionization levels. 30 seconds remaining. Last-ditch efforts saw weapons pushed far beyond safe operating parameters. The Kryllian shard singer actually cracked several of his crystalline appendages from overexertion. General Thorn's skull's roar of frustration could probably be heard 3 decks away. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Evaluation complete. Weapons down. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hiss of cooling weapon systems and the labored breathing of exhausted alien delegates. Smoke drifted from overheated equipment, while emergency cooling systems activated throughout the testing area. "Final results processing," the AI announced. "Stand by." Vex Thane slumped in his observation seat, all four eyes focused on the display screens. "This is embarrassing. The humans managed 3 kills and then gave up. They'll be disqualified for insufficient target elimination, but at least they maintained perfect accuracy with their primitive weapons." The results display activated, showing target elimination counts for each delegation. Krillian Delegation, 112 targets eliminated. Accuracy rating, 47%. Vorthak Delegation, 98 targets eliminated. Accuracy rating, 39%. Zentorian Delegation, 126 targets eliminated. Accuracy rating, 51%. Human Delegation. The display paused. Every being in the chamber held their breath, prepared to witness the humans' humiliating failure. 3 shots, 3 hits, total failure to advance to Phase 2 trials. Human Delegation, 250 targets eliminated. Accuracy rating, 100%. The silence stretched so long that several beings actually checked their atmospheric readings to ensure they weren't experiencing oxygen deprivation. Then Zern Delta found his voice. "That can't be right. They only fired 3 shots. We all saw it. 3 shots, and then they stopped shooting." Admiral Keth Prime's 6 arms waved frantically as he accessed the simulation records. Display firing solution analysis for human delegation. The chamber's main screen showed a tactical breakdown of the human engagement. 3 shots, each tracked in precise detail from muzzle to target impact. Shot 1, Captain Vale, target designation Alpha 7. A command and control fighter coordinating enemy squadron movements. Impact, catastrophic systems failure resulting in loss of tactical coordination for 47 enemy units. Secondary effect, navigation beacon destruction caused collision chain reaction, eliminating additional 12 targets. Shot 2, Lieutenant Knox, target designation Delta Prime. Primary ammunition depot for enemy capital ship formation. Impact, explosion cascade destroyed ammunition supplies for entire enemy fleet. Secondary effect, debris field eliminated additional 68 targets caught in blast radius. Shot 3, Sergeant Morrison, target designation Omega Central. Main reactor core of enemy command Dreadnought. Impact, reactor overload caused total fleet power grid failure. Secondary effect, dead ships drifted into gravitational well, eliminating remaining 126 targets. The tactical analysis concluded with a simple statement. Mission objectives achieved with minimal resource expenditure. No secondary ammunition required. For the second time in as many minutes, the chamber fell completely silent. Captain Vale holstered his rifle with practiced ease. "Admiral, I believe that concludes our Phase 1 evaluation. Should we schedule Phase 2 trials? Or do you need time to process these results?" Admiral Keth Prime's voice sounded like it was being transmitted through several layers of cotton. You eliminated the entire enemy force, with 3 shots." "Well," Knox interjected with the tone of someone explaining something obvious, "we did warn you that humans typically only need 1 shot per target." Morrison's grin was absolutely predatory. "The trick isn't shooting everything that moves, Admiral. The trick is knowing which targets to shoot so that everything else stops moving." Vex Thane's mandibles clicked rapidly as his brain struggled to process what he'd witnessed. But that's impossible. No species achieves that level of strategic targeting accuracy. It requires perfect understanding of enemy systems, flawless ballistic calculation, and the ability to predict secondary and tertiary effects across an entire battlefield. Captain Vale's expression suggested he was trying very hard not to laugh. "Commander, you asked how humans expect to survive prolonged engagement with limited ammunition. The answer is simple. We don't plan for prolonged engagements." The implications hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. Every military doctrine they understood was based on sustained firepower, overwhelming enemy positions through superior rate of fire and energy output. The concept of ending battles with surgical precision rather than overwhelming force was so alien to their thinking that it bordered on incomprehensible. Shardsinger Nexus produced a sound like wind chimes being dissolved in acid. "Your weapons, they're not primitive at all, are they?" Morrison shook his head, still grinning. "Oh, they're primitive all right. Simple mechanical action, chemical propellant, basic kinetic projectile. Nothing fancy about the hardware." "Then how?" Lieutenant Knox tapped her temple. "The weapon isn't the rifle, Shardsinger. The weapon is up here. The rifle is just how we deliver it." Admiral Keth Prime reviewed the tactical analysis again, his expression growing more disturbed with each passing moment. "You identified the 3 critical failure points in a complex battle scenario, calculated firing solutions accounting for secondary and tertiary effects, and executed perfect shots under time pressure. This level of strategic analysis should require entire tactical planning committees and massive computational resources." "Should," Vale agreed. "But humans have this annoying habit of doing things that should be impossible." The chamber's environmental systems finally managed to clear the residual energy from the alien weapons, but the atmosphere remained charged with something else entirely. The dawning realization that every assumption about human military capability had been catastrophically wrong. Vex Thane accessed his personal communication system. "I need to contact Fleet Command immediately. Our intelligence estimates for human combat effectiveness require significant revision." The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Coalition High Command convened exactly 47 minutes after the human marksmanship demonstration. Admiral Keth Prime had never seen the council chambers filled with such barely controlled panic. Representatives from 17 different species sat around the massive circular table, their various forms of agitation creating a symphony of clicks, hisses, and electronic warbles. "Let me understand this correctly." Fleet Admiral Grix Vorthan's metallic voice resonated through his translation matrix. 3 humans, armed with what our intelligence classified as laughably primitive kinetic weapons, achieved a perfect mission completion rating against a scenario designed to test advanced military capabilities. The holographic display floating above the table showed the tactical breakdown on continuous loop. 3 shots, 250 targets eliminated, 100% accuracy rating. The simulation parameters were triple-checked, reported Chief Analyst Dex Morrison, her bioluminescent patches flickering with nervous energy. Maximum difficulty settings. No computational assistance provided to participants. Standard evaluation protocol used for the last 3 centuries. High Counselor Threx 9, whose species had held the previous galactic marksmanship record, made a sound like grinding metal. "Our best tactical units require comprehensive battle management systems, real-time targeting assistance, and coordinated fire support to achieve similar results." These humans did it with iron sights and basic mathematics. Captain Vale, Lieutenant Knox, and Sergeant Morrison sat quietly in the designated observer section, apparently fascinated by the ceiling architecture while chaos erupted around them. They'd been invited to attend the emergency session as technical consultants, though nobody seemed quite sure what to consult them about. Defense Minister Kef Strand's four heads turned in unison toward the human delegation. "Captain Vale, perhaps you could explain your tactical methodology? Our analysts are having difficulty understanding how you identified the critical target priorities so quickly." Vale straightened in his chair, looking mildly surprised to be addressed directly. "Minister, it wasn't particularly complicated. We observed the enemy formation structure, identified command and control nodes, located logistical vulnerabilities, and selected targets whose destruction would cause maximum cascade failure throughout their operational framework." The silence following this explanation was so profound that the chamber's atmospheric recycling systems sounded like industrial machinery. "You observed," repeated High Counselor Threx 9 slowly, "with your organic visual systems. No sensor enhancement, no tactical analysis algorithms, no computational modeling support." "Correct," Knox confirmed, "though I should mention that humans generally don't require computer assistance for basic pattern recognition and threat assessment. It's sort of a survival trait we developed." Chief Analyst Dex Morrison's bioluminescence shifted to colors that roughly translated as deeply disturbed. The simulation contained over 2,000 individual system interactions, 15 different classes of enemy vessels, and 47 potential tactical vulnerabilities. Processing that information volume should require dedicated analysis teams working for hours. Morrison chuckled. "Ma'am, with respect, humans have been doing rapid tactical assessment since we lived in caves. When something with big teeth is charging at you, you don't have hours to form a committee and discuss optimal response strategies." Admiral Keth Prime accessed his personal files. "Our xenobiology reports indicate that humans evolved in an unusually hostile environment. Multiple large predator species, extreme weather variations, geological instability, and frequent resource scarcity. But this level of tactical sophistication suggests cognitive capabilities far beyond our initial estimates." "Oh, we're not particularly sophisticated," Vale replied with a self-deprecating smile. "We just learned early on that overthinking usually gets you eaten. Simple, direct solutions tend to work better than complicated ones." Defense Minister Kef Strand's heads swiveled to consult with each other before addressing the humans again. "Your species submitted formal application to join the Galactic Defense Coalition 6 months ago. Our preliminary assessment suggested that human military capabilities would be limited." "Limited how?" Knox asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Your technology level appeared significantly behind current galactic standards," Chief Analyst Dex Morrison admitted. "Chemical propulsion systems, kinetic projectile weapons, basic electronic systems. Most coalition species abandoned such primitive equipment centuries ago in favor of energy-based weapons and advanced targeting systems." Sergeant Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "So you assumed that better technology automatically means better combat effectiveness?" "Naturally," Admiral Keth Prime confirmed. "Superior weapons technology provides obvious tactical advantages: higher rates of fire, greater destructive potential, enhanced accuracy through computational assistance." "And yet," Vale observed mildly, "none of those advantages helped the other delegations achieve mission objectives more effectively than our primitive equipment did." The uncomfortable shifting that rippled through the assembled alien, delegates suggested this point had already occurred to them. Fleet Admiral Grix Vorthan's translation matrix crackled with static as he processed this information. "Are you suggesting that technological superiority doesn't guarantee military superiority?" "I'm suggesting that technology is just a tool," Knox replied. The effectiveness of any tool depends entirely on the skill and intelligence of whoever's using it. A master carpenter can build a house with hand tools, while an amateur might not manage it even with power equipment. High Counselor Threx 9 leaned forward, his mechanical components whirring softly. But surely you acknowledge the mathematical advantages of overwhelming firepower? Our standard doctrine involves saturating target areas with sufficient energy to guarantee destruction regardless of precision. Morrison's expression suggested he was trying not to laugh. Counselor? That's like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. Sure, you'll definitely hit something, but you're not likely to achieve your intended results. Then how do humans approach large-scale combat operations? Defense Minister Kef Strand inquired. Your application materials indicate that your species has extensive experience with military conflict. Unfortunately extensive, Vale agreed grimly. Humans spent most of our early history fighting each other over resources, territory, and ideological differences. We got very good at warfare because the alternative was extinction. Chief Analyst Dex Morrison's bioluminescence shifted to what might have been curiosity. Our historical databases show thousands of recorded human conflicts. The tactical complexity appears to escalate dramatically over time, despite relatively minimal changes in basic weapon technology. That's because human warfare evolved to emphasize strategy, logistics, intelligence, and adaptability rather than just firepower, Knox explained. We learned that the side with better information and superior tactics usually wins, regardless of who has bigger guns. Admiral Keth Prime pulled up tactical records from various coalition military engagements. But these principles should apply universally. Why haven't other species developed similar approaches? Morrison considered this question seriously. Admiral, I think it might be because most species achieved spaceflight and joined galactic civilization before experiencing the kind of evolutionary pressure that forced humans to develop advanced military thinking. You solved resource scarcity and territorial conflicts through technology and cooperation. We solved them through warfare and conquest. The implications of this statement seemed to hit the assembled delegates simultaneously. Their various expressions of concern, alarm, and dawning comprehension created a cacophony of alien anxiety. You're saying, High Counselor Threx 9 said slowly, that human military effectiveness isn't despite your primitive technology, but because of it. Partly, Vale confirmed. When you can't rely on overwhelming technological superiority, you develop other skills: pattern recognition, strategic thinking, improvisation, psychological warfare, resource optimization. Those capabilities don't disappear when you gain access to better equipment. Fleet Admiral Grix Vorthen's translation matrix produced sounds that didn't correspond to any recognizable language before settling back into coherent speech. This explains the simulation results. You weren't using primitive weapons ineffectively. You were using primitive weapons more effectively than we use our advanced systems. Every weapon has optimal applications, Knox observed. The key is matching your tool to your objective. Sometimes a scalpel works better than a cannon. Defense Minister Kef Strand's four heads engaged in rapid consultation before turning back to the human delegation. Captain Vale, what would happen if human military units were equipped with standard coalition technology? Vale, Knox, and Morrison exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey entire conversations. Minister, Vale replied carefully, I think that might depend on whether you're asking as an ally or as a potential adversary. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Chief Analyst Dex Morrison's bioluminescence flickered erratically. Are you suggesting that human military capabilities would be enhanced by access to advanced weapons technology? I'm suggesting, Morrison said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, that humans have a long tradition of taking whatever equipment is available and using it in ways that the original designers never intended. Admiral Keth Prime accessed historical databases, cross-referencing human technological development with military applications. What he found there made his respiratory systems stutter. Your species weaponized agricultural fertilizer, civilian aircraft, communication satellites, and industrial chemicals, he read aloud. You turned entertainment fireworks into military rockets. You converted construction equipment into combat vehicles. You used weather prediction systems for tactical advantage. Humans have this saying, Knox mentioned casually. Necessity is the mother of invention. When survival is at stake, everything becomes a potential weapon. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. Not confusion or disbelief, but the kind of profound quiet that accompanies the recognition of fundamental truth. High Counselor Threx IX's mechanical components hummed softly as he processed the implications. The Galactic Defense Coalition has never faced a truly existential threat. Our military doctrine evolved primarily for peacekeeping operations and deterrent displays. We never developed the kind of tactical sophistication that comes from fighting for survival. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Vale pointed out diplomatically. Peace and cooperation are preferable to warfare and conflict, but when genuine threats do arise, it helps to have people who understand warfare. Fleet Admiral Grix Vorthen reviewed the original human application materials. Your species requested membership in the Coalition specifically to assist with defense against potential external threats. At the time, we considered this an optimistic assessment of human capabilities. And now? Morrison asked. Now, I'm wondering whether we should be more concerned about what happens if we decline your application, the Fleet Admiral admitted. The human delegation exchanged another one of those loaded glances. Admiral, Knox said quietly, humans didn't apply to join the Coalition because we need protection. We applied because we want to help provide it. The galaxy is a big place, and there are things out there that might not be as interested in peaceful coexistence as the current Coalition species. Chief Analyst Dex Morrison's patterns had shifted to colors that suggested deep contemplation. Our long-range reconnaissance has detected several potentially hostile civilizations beyond current Coalition territory. Previous assessments suggested that standard Coalition defense capabilities would be adequate to deter aggressive action. Previous assessments assumed that potential adversaries would think like Coalition members, Vale observed. But what if they think more like humans? The question hung in the chamber's atmosphere like a toxic cloud. Defense Minister Kef Strand's heads conferred again before addressing the Assembly. Motion to immediately approve human membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition, with full military integration and technology-sharing privileges. Seconded, Admiral Keth Prime said without hesitation. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Captain Vale stood and offered a respectful nod to the assembled delegates. Thank you for your confidence. We look forward to working with you. As the human delegation prepared to leave, High Counselor Threx IX called out, Captain Vale, one final question. The simulation you completed so effectively, that was a relatively simple scenario compared to real combat operations. How would human forces perform against truly formidable opponents? Vale paused at the chamber entrance, his expression growing thoughtful. Counselor, I hope we never have to find out. But if we do? He smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several aliens unconsciously step backward. Well, let's just say that humans have never encountered a problem we couldn't solve by shooting the right target. The chamber doors closed behind the human delegation, leaving the coalition leadership to contemplate the implications of their newest members. Outside in the corridor, Knox turned to her companions. "Think we made the right impression?" Morrison chuckled. "Did you see their faces when Vale mentioned shooting the right target? I think we made an impression, all right." "Good," Vale replied, checking his communicator for messages from Earth Command. "Because, if the intelligence reports are accurate, we're going to need every advantage we can get when the real threats show up." As the three humans walked toward their transport, their footsteps echoing through the corridors of galactic power, none of the aliens who watched them pass could shake the feeling that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted in ways they were only beginning to understand. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, ancient sensors detected the electromagnetic signatures of advanced weapons testing. Things that had slumbered for millennia began to stir, drawn by the scent of new prey entering their hunting grounds. But they would discover, as so many others had before them, that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible.